It's a question I hear often in my practice too. Do people change? Can people change? And obviously, if I didn't believe that people could, I would not be sitting here today as a therapist, because I get a front row seat on change. The thing that people are not prepared for is the amount of work that they have to do. And it all starts, just like charity, it all begins at home. And by home, I mean in the heart.
Welcome to the Struggle and Strive podcast. I am your host, Estel Wallace. We are covering relationships and marriage today, and I'm very honored to have my dear friend and licensed psychotherapist, EMDR certified for a long time. She was our clinical director at Cornerstone Healing Center, Karen Williams.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to talk about relationships and marriage. The first thing I want to get into is talking about childhood experiences, the household we grow up in, and the effects that have on our adult relationships, how that carries
right on.
The official word, I believe, is transference, right? Maybe if you want to just share a little bit about your childhood and how you saw that play out as an adult in your relationships.
That's a great place to start, Estel. I think, the family of origin provides the template, provides the kind of the DOS or the working language of the relationship. And to give you the classic example, where I came from, I grew up in southeastern Michigan. I had very conservative parents, very much wanted to do the right thing, ethical, the whole nine. And but there just wasn't any kind of education on relationships. There wasn't even much talk about it. They were good Midwesterners. They kept things tightly buttoned up in that regard. But the things that I heard were mainly cloaked in humor. And it was my father usually iterating something to the effect of, "Don't ever get married. Damn it, don't ever get married. Don't ever get married." And so that was my lead-in going into relationships, which is not the best setup. Of course, my mom, I know that they loved each other. I knew that the rudimentary stuff was there. They had a 55-plus year marriage and died in love with each other. But I would say that piece about, where you come from, that's kind of those are the tools that you're walking in with. Think about how much time we spend on doing the things that we really value in life, like our jobs or like for goodness sake, our phones, the amount of time that we devote to just those enterprises. Do we put in as much educational background for relationships and what to have to make a really fantastic one? We don't. And we don't ask for help with it. We usually wait until about, the nomenclature says, about 8 years from the time of the profound suffering begins to reach for help. And by that time, most people have sunk the ship on the marriage. So
I was adopted, grew up in my grandparents' home. They were a full generation behind me. So they were the silent generation. We didn't talk about anything. We certainly didn't talk about my parents or the reason they were divorced or the reason they had been to prison or the reason I was in their house and not my parents' house. We never talked about those things. Okay. I believe that being unconsciously going through the foster system and then being adopted led me to a singular belief about women, which is what is the most important one in my life? How did she treat me? Yeah. So, and that was the expected, anticipated behavior of every relationship with a woman I was in for a long time, at least in my young life, was that they won't stay.
Right.
They'll leave. They'll leave. I don't have enough time to get from one relationship the amount of love, affection, validation that I require.
You needed.
And that was sort of how I operate. I mean, when I did my first sex inventory in 12-step world, my sponsor saw it instantly.
That's when it became available.
Yeah, he's like, "You got mommy issues, bro."
I had daddy issues. Those are powerful lessons.
It is, getting to a place where I could see it myself, where it was pointed out to me, it became very clear that my expectation of what a woman was supposed to provide was very distorted from reality. Mm-hmm. In fact, the guy that took me through the steps at the time, when we unpacked this, and it was my first introduction to really looking at transference. We didn't call it that, but mm-hmm. When I said, what do you mean I got mommy issues? He's like, your mom left, and then you were, planted in this house with your grandparents, and while they may have been decent people, you didn't get what you needed, and you have been chasing that. And I got to tell you, you're never going to find the unrequited love for your mother in any of these women.
No.
He said that you're only going to find the love that you require in one place, and that's in a relationship with God.
Right on.
And I was floored.
Right on.
I was floored.
Yeah.
I thought, Matt, like realizing you've been going the wrong way, except it's been like a decade and a half, 2 decades. I've been going the wrong direction, like so far down the wrong road.
Yeah. So he kind of rang your bell and told you a truth about yourself, and that resonated, impacted you enough to fiercely want to try to do something different. I'm curious, then how did you transition into a different kind of knowledge about relationships? How did you learn?
Through trial and error. My next relationship was my very first completely committed relationship where I was monogamous. Mm-hmm. From the time I started dating, which is like around the age of 12 or 13, I don't necessarily think that that's healthy either, but
right.
I had multiple girlfriends all the time, and not because I was trying to do something external, mm-hmm. and it wasn't necessarily about sex either. I very much was trying to fill this vacancy inside of me that was just, and it was never going to get filled.
Right.
So my first relationship after doing inventory, I had a girlfriend, and I tried with the will that this is going to be different, and I'm going to give this relationship a fair shake. I'm not going to put the expectation that she is going to fill this thing inside of me, and I'm just going to love her and see if she loves me back and that this can work. And that was a good exercise, but it was an unhealthy relationship. It mm-hmm. was toxic in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I was newly sober. She was newly sober, and it didn't work out. Also, she continued to drink, so she didn't stay sober. And that in itself has its own hornet's nest of problems.
Yeah.
And when I tried to leave, I actually wrestled with I'm doing it right this time. Mm-hmm. Like, why isn't this working? I'm giving it
your all.
Yeah. And I just wasn't putting it took me a while to put, months at least, mm-hmm. to put all the pieces together. Like, okay, I am giving it my all, and it's okay that this still isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are other pieces than just my effort that are involved here.
Yeah.
And maybe the best thing I can do in this instance is to separate and start fresh.
And those attraction patterns, what we've also learned, we're attracted to dysfunction in many respects. So we keep kind of going back to the same dry well to get the goods that we need.
The same dry well.
Yeah. And
it's a good way to say it.
There isn't any water there. So we have to get really thirsty before we want to change. It's a question I hear often in my practice too, frequently, which is, do people change? Can people change? And obviously, if I didn't believe that people could, I would not be sitting here today as a therapist, because I get a front row seat on change. The thing that people are not prepared for is the amount of work that they have to do, and it all starts just like charity. It all begins at home, and by home I mean in the heart. Working on that seedbed.
Well, and something I'm not so sure people are quantifying when they're asking the question, can't people change? The short answer is yes. The more nuanced answer is, are you willing to wait around to see if they do the work? Because it could take years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're married to or dating in a serious relationship with a practicing alcoholic, a practicing drug addict who's smoking fentanyl in your home, and you're raising children, how long do you tell yourself this is a phase, they're going to sober up, before you take action?
The typical thing that people do, not because they want to, but because of the template, because of the pre-programming, is they will try to fix the externals. And so I'm just going to use the classic traditional example. The pre-programmed codependent wife in this particular situation, will try everything in the kitchen sink to change the husband who's having the addiction issue. And she will enable the behaviors and almost force that issue to perpetuate versus getting the help. It's not until the pivot, the turning inward to see, and people can get there through various means. They can get there through therapy. They can get there through a loving relationship with a trusted other, a friend. They can get there through God, through their pastor, through their church. But something starts to help them to turn towards the inside. What is it that I am contributing to this problem? And how am I doing it? And what can I do different to get out of the tailspin?
That's the key question. What do I have to change? Because and it doesn't always have to, it's easy to focus on the negative parts of transference. It works both ways. Transference, we relive the relationships with our caregivers in adulthood, for better or for worse. We talk about the worse frequently, especially, being in behavioral health care.
Yeah.
So we're working with people that are trying to fix their lives. But I look at my wife, Nicole very well. While Peter and I have our own, my father-in-law, we have our own personality differences. When you match us up we have a lot of commonalities too.
Mm-hmm, you do.
We're both entrepreneurs. We're both impatient. We're both, you could go down, here's an example. My father-in-law, Peter, he picked up the girls to take them on a date. This is a couple weekends ago. And I had Weston with me. I had my little guy with me. And we were going to look at a property we're closing on, just walk this property, get some keys. Then he's like, I want to buy toys. And it was the end of the day. It was like a Thursday or Friday. And I said, all right, we'll go by the mall. We'll see what they got, see if there's anything you like. And we walk into Neiman Marcus. So that's where we park. That's the only free valet at the mall. And I go in, and there's a guy that I know there. And he's like, oh, your father-in-law was just here with, I think, your kids. And I was like, that tracks. That tracks. We're basically the same person.
The same person.
And when I look into my children's eyes, especially my girls, my hope is that they will not only, I know that they're going to unconsciously seek out someone like me in adulthood. So my hope is, am I being the best version of myself for them? Right. Am I setting a good template for them to seek out?
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I hope. And likewise with Nicole and our son.
Right.
Yeah.
That the change and the pivot and the things that are hard to do, the hard stuff, there's an element of that is that I just can't fail to bring up here, and that is we have to violate the rules that we learned as kids.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, because the rule, like when you were talking about, we didn't talk about anything. When you definitely don't talk about your feelings. That's off the table.
Crying, nope.
No crying. And we just kind of coexist together. And so what I mean by breaking the rules is breaking those rules. And it turns from don't talk, don't trust, don't feel into, well, let's learn how. How do we talk? How do we trust? And how do we feel? How do we, like what you're doing now with your daughters, being able to own something that you did that was hurtful, not in line with the congruence of your heart, made somebody feel bad. How you fix those things and take responsibility. There's where you can teach and have an opportunity to break that old rule and step into a new way of doing stuff. And that works in marriages all day long. That starts with feelings, the things we hate to own and pay attention to.
Parenthood has been such an eye-opening experience for me, not realizing it until I had children, but realizing with young children, like I don't have anything useful to draw from that I can depend on. I've got to read. I've got to read books. I've got to talk to other parents that I view as healthy, that have healthy relationships with their children.
Right.
I've got to really work to come up with better attachment strategies with my young children. I'm getting better at it. I'm not great at it, but I do recognize, I think much more quickly, maybe than some parents, that I'm on new ground.
Right.
And I think as long as I can remember that, I can remind myself to slow down. I know that I can't go to my toolbox from childhood. Yeah. There's nothing there that's going to work.
Creating the soft place for them to land oh, look, dad's not perfect. Dad's a human. Dad makes mistakes too. And I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, and let's use the punishment for, I think, one example before we move off of this subject, because it comes up a lot with parents.
Right.
Do I spank my kids? Do I not spank my kids? Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, how did you grow up? Like, the house I grew up in, because I was raised by people that were young in the 20s and 30s, you've got to go back 100 years into our culture to know how people were raised. So we were hit with belts and switches and hit with open hands.
Yep.
My grandfather, he never punched me with a closed fist, but we were, by 2000 and on standards, we were beaten. Yep. We were abused. I never felt abused.
Right.
And when I did inventory in sobriety, that never came up.
Right.
So I want to be clear on that. Grandma, Grandpa, if you're looking at me from heaven, not mad at you about the beatings. Not at all.
It's an important clarification to make.
But it is. I've never held a grudge about that.
Yes.
And I was a hard kid to get a handle on, to be fair to them. All that being said, do Nicole and I hit our kids? And the answer is no.
Right.
We don't want to hit them. Not to throw stones at the way people used to do things. I'm not here to tell anybody how they should parent. We spanked our oldest like one time when she was about 3.
Right.
And I got to tell you, we don't do it anymore.
Yeah. And it sits with you.
Yeah.
It sits in your...
Haunted me.
Yeah.
I think I cried myself to sleep that night.
Yeah. I think it gives, my folks were Depression era. My dad was born in 28. My mom was born in 30. And they might match up with your grandparents, I think.
Close.
Ish.
You're not that much older than me, so
okay.
They'd be a little bit older than yours, but yeah.
But
close
same
enough
thing.
Culturally.
Yeah, I call it shortcut parenting, and that's what they did. They didn't have the bandwidth. They didn't have the tools or the skills. So I kind of feel as though, again, through the grace of God, when I got in the program, there was a whole new learning curve that I was looking at there. And I do remember times that I'd been harsh with my children, and I could, I felt that the old template, here it is, just as soon as you say, I'm never going to be like my parents, and then we end up saying the same things that they said to us.
Correct.
And doing the same things that we swore we would never do. But yeah, it sits with me. I've got better bandwidth. That's all I have. I went through some suffering and some soul searching with my program of discovery, and a lot of things changed because they needed to change. And I think if my parents would have had the same opportunity that I did, and it were matchy like that, I think they would have learned the same lessons too.
For sure.
And they wouldn't have transmitted that going forward.
For sure. Yeah, interesting. We end up more like our folks than we tell ourselves we're going to be, and then we grow up and marry one of our parents, even though we think we're not going to.
We don't do it, right?
Yeah, it's very, very, very common.
Right.
All right, so transference. Getting away from transference, let's talk about once we've sort of identified this, sort of in the arc of someone who's getting sober, for example, someone who's cleaning up, or they don't even have to be getting sober, but somebody who's going through a pivotal time in their life. They've maybe gotten away from a toxic relationship. What do we do now? I've got some stuff in. If you've got the study guide, you can follow along. Right. But I want to talk about ideal creation. Like, what kind of a person do I want to be? And what type of a partner am I looking for?
Right on.
And what are the deal breakers? Deal breakers were news to me.
Yeah. They can fall under several categories like red flags, non-negotiables, heck no, I won't go anywhere close to that. I think that is important, just like how something really, really white looks whiter when it's compared to something really, really black. It's the same thing when we're looking at red flags. We have
got my bucket of green paint ready.
Right. Right. We have a contrast.
She'll change.
We know
it's not that bad.
Yes, right. I can change her. I know I can.
Ooh, I can change her. Just gonna stick to it.
Or I'll ignore that. Or it's not so bad. Or we make all these kind of justifications.
It's just one time.
It's just one time. And I ask people in my sessions, well, how much do you think you should tolerate someone who lies to you? And I'm not talking about a white lie. I'm talking about a deep, dark, ugly lie. And they're like, well, never. And I'm like, exactly. How much do you think you should tolerate someone hurting you, beating you, abusing you, laying hands on you? Well, never. Exactly. So we've got to have something to go on. And when I'm coaching people through, like, I call it my mate traits. I usually reserve this part of the inventory for some set aside place so it doesn't pollute that original ideal list. But we get some good stuff percolating. There's 3 A's nobody should ever tolerate, and I can say that pretty emphatically, and that is abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, abuse
Verbal.
of any kind. And I'm talking about in the truest sense of the word abuse. An active, and I mean active addict, someone in the throes of their addiction, who's a non-relational human being. There's got to be a change there. You can't
Locked
work
in the bathroom
with that.
all night.
Yeah, yes. You can't be relational with someone who is not in their right mind.
Not coming home for days.
Putting their life in jeopardy, putting other people's lives in jeopardy. And adultery is also a very tough one to get through. I'm not going to take that bold step and say once a cheater, always a cheater. We always have, that there are those of us who make mistakes and then make amends for them. But these are 3 areas that I notice a lot in my practice that are very, very difficult for people to overcome. So if you already have this advanced information, you need to pay attention to that in your conscience. Mate traits, it's Katie bar the door. This is your ideal. So remove all fear. Try to remove even like the closest last partner you have for comparison, but just go for broke.
Yeah.
What are all the things?
It's hard to imagine it with a clean slate, but that is the best way to do an ideal.
Yeah.
Create an ideal.
You've done some inventory of your own and come up with, I think you're from what the guide said, 30. It seems like a lot at first. People are like, are you kidding me? And their jaws hit the ground.
I recommend 30. And that's just sort of a round number. There's no rule to it. In the study guide, there's a three lists, a list of and that's the most important list.
Yeah.
What is the next version of me, my best version, latest, greatest version of me operate like? What are my characteristics? Am I humble? Am I a good provider? Am I honest? Am I a good listener? I'm not.
So you're turning that around.
Work on that.
Yeah.
And then what is my ideal partner like? And then what are those deal breakers?
Right.
If you can do that, like you were just saying, in a place where you're not even transposing your last partner, those interactions onto this, because that is hard to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I want this, but the person I'm with isn't really like that. Like that's we got to try and get a clean list.
Yes, it's true.
Got to get a clean list.
There was an author, her name is Duana Welsh. She wrote a book called Love Factually. I like the book a lot. She is a quantitative researcher in the area. She's actually studied cave people. So she's taking data from way back, why men are attracted to women, why women are attracted to men. Surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, we're not that different from our cave people ancestors. So in the way we attract. So anyway, she did this big study, and she got there because she was looking for a new car. This is going to connect, trust me. But she couldn't figure out what she wanted. So she comprised this list of all the attributes that needed to be in this car. She consulted consumer guides, auto driver magazines, and all sorts of stuff. So safety, style, it's got to go from 0 to 60. It's got to look good. It's got to have all the bells and whistles. She had her list. She goes to the dealership. She finds her vehicle. Any guesses on what it might have been? It was a Mini Cooper. So her list, drives out of the parking lot. She's very happy. 3 weeks later, she's collected some data in her head now about the car she's been driving around and some observations that she's made. And one of the observations was she started seeing Mini Coopers everywhere. And this led her to the conclusion in the book that she makes is when you put the stuff down and get it out of your head and out of your viscera and onto a page, it's now something that you can tangibly see and work towards. That Mini Cooper idea, it became available to her. Mm-hmm. Data was there.
People call this the law of attraction. I don't care what you call it. The mind in the big book, the AA Big Book, there's a story about, it's called Acceptance is the Answer, and people like to quote it all the time. But the part that I think people never quote that is so fascinating about that story is he talks about his relationship with his wife and how how the program gave him a new pair of glasses that when he put them on, his magnifying mind, when he looked at her with with love and tolerance, and he could see the girl that he married, the girl that he pursued, that he was in love with. And all of a sudden those good traits grew.
He made a choice. He made a choice to not ignore, but to subrogate the negative and adopt the positive outlook. And it's
we can
beautiful.
do that with everything.
We can.
And much to your point, I love where this is going. When you make an ideal list and you get it on paper, the person that you are becoming that was previously seemingly unattainable and the person that you are hoping to meet suddenly becomes possible.
Suddenly becomes possible. Yep.
The impossible materializes.
Yep. And I think our readiness too, and I think you hit on this too, in the paperwork. I usually turn it into a PS with my clients. So how do you think that you'll find that person that you're hoping for, and they don't know the answer, and you become that list. You become the adventurer, you become the lover, you become the emotionally available person that you're looking for. And I think it's in that weird process that you do find the person, that there's just more available. You start to pick up on here's what's right in front of me at the moment.
100%. Yeah. As we become more of what we want to attract, we start to attract it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be super woo-woo or, that's fairly quantifiable, and you can it's true throughout human history. There's lots of data on it. Right. So yeah, you can try it with the Mini Cooper is a great example. I like to give people the example of playing slug bug. I haven't seen a Volkswagen Beetle in a decade probably, but I bet if we got into a minivan on a little field trip right now and we started playing slug bug, I bet we spot 10 of them.
We would find them. We sure would. There's the thing too with, and I'm not even going to attempt the attribution, but I think it's Augustine. I could be wrong. We are what we continually do. It could be Aristotle. It's one of the A's. We are what we continually do, but we also we find what we continually seek. So if it is goodness, truth, and beauty, well, that's where we're aiming our ship. And I think largely we go through life, and perhaps with our partners too, not knowing where we're going and not pivoting away from the negative and going to the positive. But that's the challenge.
And doing that with intention, aiming goodness, truth, and beauty. I love that. Aiming at what we want to be aiming at is what starts to build the momentum. Yeah. I believe that every thought is prayer. I believe that every thought is heard by God, and I believe that every thought is prayer. So the question isn't, do I believe in God? Right. The question is, what am I praying for all day? Is it mostly distraction? Because that's what I would argue most people pray for. Maybe we should get some pizza. Who's going to be playing Halo tonight? That chick's hot. Just random.
Stream of consciousness.
All day. Or am I more intentional with my thought life? Yeah. Do I have, and it's not about being rigid either. Right. I think dating with intention, living with intention isn't about, there's definitely more than a fine line. I think there's a pretty broad boundary between a life of discipline and intention versus, a life of rigidity and all these rules. I don't think it has to be so cumbersome, like, I'm allowed to do that, I'm not allowed. It's not about that. No. It's more like, this is what I want to do. I want to aim closer at this.
Yeah, you're onto something really huge. People settle all the time. And I think it goes back to that, what am I worth? What's my dignity? What's my value? And a lot of people just have work to do in this area. I think the influx of people that I see now, and this is great news, to be honest with you, this is fantastic. People are showing up in therapy because they want to be better people. That is the bulk of who I see, and I'm so impressed by this. They're not showing up there with, on their last straw.
That's where I see them.
Yeah, yes. We're on two different aspects here, but they're coming because they've caught it. Like, they caught that. I want something more. I see something more for myself. I know that there's some elbow grease and sweat equity that I got to put into this, but I think I can see it, and they're in that place of readiness. So dating with intention, and then, my goodness, what do I want for the rest of my life? What kind of person is the one that is for me, the one who is my person, the one who's my, as you said, who's my hell yeah person? When you met Nicole, you knew it came together. it fomented, and you made a family.
And I would add to that, we have evolved so much in the 17 years we've been together, the 14 years of marriage. You know, we're not the same people we were when we met. The thing that allows us to continue growing and growing together is our open-mindedness, our ability to forgive, our tenderness towards not holding big grudges. And I think we're going to get into some of that stuff here in a minute.
Yep. It's so funny as you're looking through that.
Please.
I was thinking literally about 2 weeks ago, you came across my mind, and I remember that interview that we did, and it was role reversal. So I was interviewing you and Nicole. It was such a good interview.
I have it. So this is amazing. I'll just talk about it.
Yeah.
So Karen was the clinical director for Cornerstone for many years. She's the one that created our curriculum. She's an amazing clinician. So she and I and my wife, Karen, obviously, my wife, Nicole, the three of us are friends. And Karen, we were doing some content production then. And Karen said, well, I want to interview the two of you. You guys have a successful marriage. Let me just, as a therapist, let me ask you a bunch of questions. Yeah. And she did. We recorded it. It must have been about an hour.
We cried.
We cried. There was laughter. There was storytelling. It was epic. And at the end of it, we had no sound. We recorded zero sound. If you listen hard, like you can hear what we're saying, like in the video. It's really bad though. I've hung on to it though, and hopefully my kids will watch it when they're grown up.
I hope something. But what struck me though is what you're describing. You have evolved. You and Nicole, you're not the same people. But just like, river rocks, when they bump up against each other for long periods of time, they become really smooth and, nice to hold. And all those rough edges are knocked off of them. They're not as abrasive as they once were. And I think that's a metaphor for marriage, too. And then we allow things to kind of flow through us. And you and she have that together, and that is I'm going to say it. I'm just plugging I know we're not talking about that, but it needs to be said. We need good examples of people that are doing this and heart and soul in it, and that is the two of you. And it's amazing to see what you can do with it. I think the sky's the limit, but I'm blessed by your relationship, by both of you individually, yes, but by the relationship too. It gives me great hope and great courage.
Well, I'll take that as a huge compliment. That chokes me up. Yeah, I love her so much. The next piece that I want to sort of dive into is monogamy.
Yeah.
This is an interesting topic. I've met over the 20 years I've been helping people. I've met a lot of people who think a lot of different things. Almost all of them, underneath the surface, deep down want to be with the one.
Yes.
But then they come to these relationships with so much previous baggage, so much previous experience that they maybe have not identified as unhealthy as of yet. Mm-hmm. And monogamy comes up quite a bit. I know people that don't want to get married because they're scared of the commitment. There are people that I'll say it, men that I know and have worked with in their late 30s, early 40s, even into their late 40s that are finding themselves bumping up against time now, starting to get a handle on their own mortality and realizing maybe they played the field too long.
Yeah.
They thought they were just going to George Clooney it forever, but even Clooney got married and started having kids at this isn't for everyone necessarily, but it's for most people.
I think you're hitting on a subject which is which does need to be discussed, and we need to have more open discussions about it, which is the sadness of forever bachelorhood or forever bachelorettehood. There is something in that. Man was not destined to be alone.
No,
we were not made for that. We were made to unite, to be with, to connect. Connection and belonging is kind of part of our human nature, is how we were wired.
I remember when I was marriage curious, and Nicole and I were dating. She's heard me say this many times, and I wasn't sure that I was ready. I wasn't sure that I was ready for the commitment of marriage, of monogamy. And this is an important thing. This comes up frequently with men that I sponsor or mentor in one form or another. They'll say, I don't know that I'm ready for the commitment of marriage. And I say, why? They say, well, I don't know if I'm ready for this to be the last woman I ever sleep with. And I say, well, why? And they say, well, I still think other women are hot. And I say, well, that just means that you're a heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
That you still find other people attractive. In fact, it means quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Monogamy and the value of monogamy, part of that value, a factor of that value is the commitment.
Yeah.
That holds a lot of value.
Right on.
Of course, Nicole finds other men attractive. It would be odd if she didn't. I'm not that good looking of a guy. I'm strong 7 at best. If I had a full head of hair, maybe that might change. But, her commitment to me is based on so much more than that. Mm. Likewise, me with her. I brought this to my sponsor and I said, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if this is the last woman I'm ever going to sleep with. And he says, well, why? And I said, well, I still find a lot of women attractive. And he was like, yeah, you always will. Mm-hmm. You always will. That's not the issue. You don't find a spouse by sleeping around and then stopping at the hottest one.
Right.
Or sleeping around and then just picking one to be the partner.
Right.
For me, I had to stop sleeping around, date with intention. And by date, I don't mean sleep with.
Right, sure.
Actually just go on. I learned very quickly I had to go on coffee dates during the day.
Right.
This was for me. And I don't drink, but I would go to after work drinks with some of these gals that I would meet. I would go to dinner, and I quickly realized there's too many expectations with this. Yeah, there's
an expectation at the end of that. Right.
So I started doing coffee dates with these gals, and I would find out in a conversation in 30 minutes to an hour, there are too many things that didn't line up, and it's way easier to break up with somebody after 45 minutes.
Right. Versus getting invested in them and having the chemical attraction.
And your phone's in her name, and you guys have a dog together, and her car is in your name, and what do you call that? Enmeshment?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's bad. It's hard to get out of that.
Settling on what is the kind of man I want to be, what kind of a woman do I want to be with, and then looking for that person. If you're lucky enough I was lucky enough to find somebody that really fit all that bill. Are there still question marks? Of course.
Yeah.
I was 30 years old. She was 22.
Yeah.
There were still questions, but none of the red flags to paint green.
Right on.
It was sort of an open highway and the invitation to, is this what you really want? And at the end of the day, yes. And sacrificing, I don't even call it much of a sacrifice, but sacrificing the right to sleep around with random partners, that's a fairly small sacrifice. That's a small cost for what you get in return.
Yep. And that is your testimony to that too. Are you happier now? A man who's got
a million times. The sex is a million times better. Our love life, our romance.
Yeah.
The businesses we've been able to build, the journeys and adventures we've been on, the children we've brought into this world.
That's the gift of a healthy marriage.
Oh my gosh.
So it sells itself. And that, I think, again, why this topic needs to be discussed at depth, because it does. We have, we are body and soul composites. We're unique in this. We're different than the angels. We're different than the animals. We are in this very interesting place. And so our body reminds us, like you said, I'm drawn and attracted. I find other women attractive.
I'm also attracted to hot fudge sundaes the first thing in the morning. It doesn't mean I ate them.
And therein lies and I love chocolate, and there's never enough chocolate on the planet.
Sure.
But I don't even eat chocolate anymore. I've kind of had to, have my little piece with that. But in this mind soul composite, we have appetites. And I will say this much too, and that's kind of where our feelings are, in the lower appetites. But that's not where it ends. We don't build an altar to that. We operate from our intellect and our will. And so our lifespan is constantly this battle. I think we're in it because, our history points to this. But, who's going to win? Is it going to be my lower appetites? Is it going to be, I want what I want when I want it? Kind of the addict mentality. Or do I table those things, and do I discipline myself? Do I act like a warrior? Do I take myself seriously enough to say, you know what, I can delay gratification, I can defer, my temporal happiness because I know that there's something fantastic that God wants for me
So
that I
much
want for
better.
myself. Yeah.
The pastor of the church I go to says wives are better than porn, and he's right 1,000 times. 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I'll work with a guy, and he'll the conversation always starts the same way. I'm struggling with porn. I usually say, I bet you're not struggling at all. I bet you're not. I bet it's not much of a struggle.
Right.
I say, so what's the problem? And they say, well, I don't want to do this, and I continue to do it. I said, well, if you don't want to do it, then let's talk about what you're giving up. You know, like let's build some
Really?
more reasons behind, instead of just a feeling of why you don't want to do it. Like let's build some real reasons behind building a new life where you're doing something different. Based on our like you described our lower appetites. Yeah, of course you want that.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. And if I told you that rather than having an intimate relationship with a fucking screen, you could have,
Which is not a relationship.
exactly. You could have an incredible and very erotic relationship with a woman, with a smoking hot woman. Like when you look at it like that, there's no choice. You're like, obviously I want the relationship.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, so let's do the work. It's every aspiring entrepreneur out there that wants a McLaren but isn't willing to put in the sweat equity to build a business.
Right. Yeah. You got to have the building blocks. So being willing. So I think this is where people, we can shore up some of that stuff. How do I change my mindset? How do I go forward with intention? How do I, what if I want to have this new life? What do I do for myself? And I think it does. It requires an inventory, some soul searching on what's really, really important. What are my values? How do I see myself? What do I want for my future? And it's never too late. It's never too late to change course. I think there's a lot of people that have revised their trajectory in their life and going forward and had to look at what they were spending most of their time doing, that is ultimately what they value, and then being very intentional about, hey, let's reel that back in. Let's consider something different, and move in the direction that I want to go, in the place where I'm most at home, the desire of my heart.
So, lastly, to wrap up, I'd really like to talk about once I find myself in a committed relationship and we're going for it, how do we, in practicality, how do I tolerate someone else's shortcomings? Because we all have shortcomings. And after the honeymoon phase is over, you're sharing your life with someone and they come with their own habits, their own idiosyncrasies. I think that's the right word. How do we learn to tolerate another person and not grow to resent them over time?
So I definitely want to hear your answer on this. My where I try to help couples and in my own experiences, I think we have to spend some time recognizing that we are in each other's shoes and we are on the same team. We really want the same things. We're just going about it differently. So stepping into that, a favorite thing of mine is, again, I can't argue with the truth of the moment for me, which are my feelings, and knowing myself and knowing how I feel. That's usually kind of okay, something's off. That's my thing. And then it's based upon something. It's based upon something either going on with me or with the situation or in my past. It behooves me to take some time to really sort that out before I try to go be relational with you.
That's hard to do.
It's very hard. It's hard to do. It's in the pause, though.
It's in the pause.
Rather than going for that high reactionary value, I've got to be right. I want to take a step back and say, I want us both to be right. I want us both to win. So that's a great degree of force to action, but it'll help you. And we can talk about some other interventions I love using, some grounding techniques that may help in that moment. The third thing there is asking for what you need. This is the person that has my back. I fail to see that when I'm in the reaction pattern, but what I need is, and I think also the person needs to consider what I can reasonably expect them to do for me. So it's not going to be, I want you to be like Jim. No, I want
you to make me happy.
Right. Or I don't want you to ever do that again. Because guess what? We're going to do that again. But we've got to have the bandwidth of forgiveness in there to be able to say, you know, what's reasonable for me to ask of you is this thing. Do you think you can do that? And here's why. Because, and the because is always the spin zone, the positive spin. Because I think it will help me. I think it will help us be more harmonious together. I think it will help the situation that we're dealing with and coming to a solution. It will help me greatly if you just listened. So that's kind of my spiel. How do you see it? How do you and Nicole do it?
By being gracious with each other, and we're not experts at it by any stretch. Lord knows you ask her, she'll tell you what a shitty listener I am. But I try, and I'm a better listener in 2024 than I was in 2010.
Right on.
Much better than I was then. So I'm a bad listener. I'll air out some of Nicole's stuff. She's not very punctual. She's just not a very timely person. Always been that way. Was very frustrated with it early in our relationship. And I got to a place, and I don't even know when, many years ago now, where I just accepted that if we were going somewhere together, we were probably not going to be 10 minutes early, which is what I prefer. Mm-hmm. And I just got my head around that. And I've gotten much better. I don't know, you have to ask her if it's good. I've gotten much better about sticking with the time thing. Giving her a fair warning of how much time we have to go, and not getting frustrated or upset about it. So, example, we've got to be at a wedding. It's a 30-minute drive. I say, "Hun, we've got to leave in 5 minutes." Mm-hmm. She says, "Okay, I'm not quite ready yet." Okay. In 5 minutes, I say, "Hun, if we want to be on time, we've got to leave now. Are you ready to go now?" And she says, "No, just give me some more time." I say, "Hey, take your time. No sweat." And I just, as hard as it is for me, I just metabolize the fact that we're going to not be on time, and that's okay, because I'm going to a place with the woman that I share my life with, and I love her so much. And we're going to have a good time, and I can save my, the whatever satisfaction it is I get out of being places on time for when I'm going places alone.
You nailed it. You gave grace. When you said metabolize, I have this picture of like Alka-Seltzer going into the cup and
because
dissolving.
It feels like heartburn when it's happening. It's like, oh my God, we're going to be late.
We're going to be late.
And I'm not going to be late. We're going to be late because of you. And this is how the resentment starts. Yeah. And I've learned to just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. And God bless her. There are lots of shortcomings that I have. Yeah. That she treats me equally with grace.
She puts up with Yeah. When you say so that part about the giving grace, both of you have a good, and I think this is, to me, the bottom line. No, nobody's maliciously evil. Like, that has not happened. Nobody's really doing things like, yeah, I'm going to get my partner. That's not happening. But you had an objective to get to that wedding on time, right?
I like to be everywhere on time.
You wanted to relax and be social and enjoy and pay tribute to that couple that's getting married and be with your bride. All good. And she wanted to take time to find the right flipping pair of shoes that was going to make her look hotter than hot for you.
And get her hair right. And, yeah.
So she could show up on your arm looking fantastic like she always does. So it's all good. Like I said, it's just the different weird way men and women have going about it. So giving grace. Gottman says, I believe his stuff is fantastic. If you get a chance to kind of go through it. But Gottman says 5-to-1 ratio. If you have a beef with your loved one, which you will have if you're a normal, regular breathing person, come up with five fantastic things about them that you can be grateful for. And I think to get ahead of that a little bit, keep a gratitude journal, not just for yourself, but for that person, what you see in them, what you love in them, what drew and attracted you to them in the first place, so that you're prepared also to offer praise. We don't do enough of that in our world. We don't see the good enough and actually give voice to it. And I would say that 5-to-1 ratio is a good rule of thumb.
It's huge. Someone challenged me to ask my wife what she sees when she sees me. And it never crossed my mind because, over the years, I build up my own narrative of what I think. I've weaved together a tapestry, a narrative of what I think she thinks about me. And my own personal experience, obviously not everybody's, but coming from a place of low self-esteem, I assume that what her narrative about me is not awesome, which doesn't make any sense logically. And I asked her, this is a few years ago, and I said, how do you see me?
Right.
And her answers blew me away. It blew me away. And then she asked me the same thing. And of course, I told her what I see. And I don't know if she was as blown away as I was, but I hope she was.
You would pick each other all over again.
All over again. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Well, Karen, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to have you here with us on Struggle and Strive, talking about relationships and marriage, sticky, tricky stuff, relationships.
Yeah.
So I hope this has been helpful for any of you that are watching. I hope you found some insights, some nuggets. Feel free, if you would like to learn more, to go to struggleandstrive.co, download the study guide. You can get more out of it. There are some authors mentioned in there. Likewise, if you want a follow-up video, more specific questions answered, feel free to let us know in the comments. Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Estel. It's a pleasure.